Man, it's not so.
Hi, everyone. We have something special here today. We're so excited. I have a personal relationship with this machine.
We can't talk about that, though. Just kidding.
No.
It's amazing what it does. The power of vibration. Sorry.
Did I miss something?
Oh, that part's already over.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I just love this group. It's so. Thank you guys for being you.
There. That's about as good as it's going to get. So it's on the paradigm at least. So we'll wait till everybody to come in. If anybody's not here, please raise your hand. You're not present.
Believe me?
Couple honest people. So I don't know if I'll remember it to say it before the end of the call, but next week I will be unveiling my Aramaic translation of the Hail Mary prayer. After being people requesting it for years. So I worked on it for a while, and then I sort of turned my back on it because I wasn't very happy about other people's choice of not only words but pronunciations. And then I just went and I finally nailed it a couple of days ago. Yeah. So we'll do that next week, and I'll even talk about it's like the paradigm is talking.
Yeah, I know.
Words coming from a device. So but next week I'll unveil that, and I'll talk a little about where the prayer actually came from, which came from several different places, and it eventually just sort of got put together. But in different cultures, the prayer is different. Actually, it's a different set of words in some places. So anyway.
I would love to know the history of where it came from, how it got put together, all of that.
Yeah, about half of it came from the Gospel of Mark. Or yeah, is it the Gospel of Mark? Yeah, the Gospel of Mark.
I thought you said Luke.
Was it Luke? Okay, the Gospel of Luke. Yeah, that's why I'm questioning it. So, well, geez, thanks for correcting me. Yeah.
I'm only correcting you with what you told me. Yeah, I don't know anything.
It is Luke. Although Luke probably came from Mark originally, so if that makes sense. But
right.
Anyway. Today what we'll do is we'll talk a little about revelation and prophecy and things like that, the end of the world, in a very different way than most people would think of. So whenever everybody's ready, I can move over to the paradigm, and I will say you're not going to hear a lot of it on a cell phone, and honestly, if you have even if you have like a really nice speaker system on your computer and you've got a subwoofer, you're still not going to feel what it's like to be in the room with it. As a matter of fact, like Nia had come and done like a 3-day sort of 2-on-1 retreat with Loretta and I a few years ago. And we even at Mountain Light Sanctuary, we put it like right next to her, and she slept right next to the damn thing. Like every night we had it on all night long. So, it's a pretty amazing device. So if I touch the camera, I'm afraid it's going to fall. So that's the best view I'm going to get of it. I'm walking by.
Well, maybe you can explain what it does and
no way. Does it look better with or without lights? Looks better without. So what paradigm does is it, oh man, how can I say this in a short form? Paradigm is this top part here is an exact, much smaller dimensional replica of the Great Pyramid of Khufu in Giza, obviously in Cairo in Egypt. The electronics inside of this are actually in the same spots as known chambers, walkways, etc. of the Great Pyramid. It's got a quartz crystal capstone. There's a selenite wand that goes down in the middle. All of this is going to go over most people's heads. That is based in a circuit board, completely analog. It's a tone generator, a synthesizer, nothing digital. There's no computers except for an analog timer. There's no recordings, anything of that sort. This was invented by one of our best friends, August Worley, who worked one-on-one with a guy named Bob Moog. Bob Moog is the guy that invented the Moog, the Mini Moog, all these different synthesizers. Songs like Nights in White Satin, or bands like Yes, or bands like Led Zeppelin, they all had tons of Moogs, especially back in the 70s. Stevie Wonder played Moogs, Herbie Hancock, everybody. But there's like Nikola Tesla technology in here. There's Edgar Cayce technology. There's ancient Egyptian technology, Moog technology. And I'll even say Nikola Tesla, while he was still alive, actually created a vibrating disc very similar to this, that he was actually researching different frequencies in New York and realizing that certain frequencies would stimulate certain body areas, etc. And Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, happened to be one of his best friends. And the story goes that Tesla had Twain stand on this disc because Twain had been constipated for a while. He said a couple of weeks, and that doesn't sound like a good place to be. And within 45 seconds, as the story goes, Twain was running into the bathroom. I'm not doing that to you today. I will also say that, as an example, there's lots of new technology or new research, scientific research, etc., such as 41 hertz eradicate. I think it's 41. Don't correct or don't quote me on the frequency, but there's a frequency actually that completely eradicates the existence of Alzheimer's in the neurons of mice. So we're not going to be doing that either per se. What this does is it moves through. I'm going to turn it on without actually turning somebody say yes if you can hear me and the video is okay right now.
Yes.
Make sure. Okay, good. Right now we're on the root chakra. You're not really going to see it with the camera, and I don't want to pull it in too much closer because I'll just mess up where the camera's at, but it goes through the 7 chakras, starting with the root chakra, the red, of course. And as it goes into each of the chakras, the quartz capstone, of course, changes color. Now, a lot of people don't realize that most, but not quite all of the pyramids that have been located in Egypt had pyramidions, which is what this is called, the capstone. Also in China, there was quite a few pyramids that had crystal pyramidions specifically. The ones that are on the 3 pyramids in Giza have all been stolen. A lot of other ones have either been stolen, put in storage, etc. Most people don't realize that they were actually constructed with a pyramidion that was different than the body itself. So let's put it this way, without going really deep into cymatics, this instrument really, to say it bluntly, is a living being. We call this the baby. This is literally like a vibrational cornerstone of our entire lives, of all my teaching, because I've been saying for decades, it's all about frequency. It's all about vibration. Well, this actually brings that fully into focus. And people can have an experience such as if you do a private session, you actually put headphones on, you get a slightly different amplitude of frequency in each ear. It's actually similar frequencies, but they're amplified out of phase with each other. That actually causes the brain to entrain on that. And then you're also feeling the vibration of the unit itself. This subwoofer there's a 15-inch speaker under this thing, subwoofer. So like I say, you're not going to feel the fullness of it, but I'm just going to slowly turn this root tone up. This is the root chakra. I want you to be aware of your breath right now. One thing you'll notice is as we move into higher frequencies, the tones are going to keep getting a little louder and louder. It takes more power because of that wider amplitude to amplify these lower frequencies. So we actually have two different tones here that are really close. I'm going to pull them out from each other. You hear that? That's two different tones actually responding. And now I'm going to bring it back into unison. But when I pull them slightly out, that's called a beat frequency, which is actually a third voice that's created by two tones that are so close to unison, yet they're out just enough to create a third voice. It's exactly what our spiritual life is. There's the eternal, there's our humanness, our self, so to speak, spirit, and the third voice is what was called the Holy Spirit, which is that third voice is the, whether we're, basically, to be blunt, whether we're in or out of tune with the eternal. So what I'm going to do is just take 7 minutes to move through the chakras, about a minute on each one, and then I'm going to bring it back to silence, and then I'll slowly swap my camera around and I'll be in front of the computer. But there's nothing you need to know about this. I'm actually going to put my, kind of squat down here and put my mic down near the base. If the camera went off, let me know, because I hit something. Down near the base, and you'll hear it vibrating a lot better than if I was further away. So we're just going to move through the 7 chakras rather than talk about everything this puppy does. Have a fun journey. Be aware of your breath. important that you're breathing right now. Be sure that your breath is moving, rising, falling. Well, well, well. So is that weird or what? I did something I don't normally do. What I did was I actually dropped the two bass tones out, which is kind of like having two different singing bowls, analog singing bowls, and I left just the third tone in. And I was told before we got this, and as we were working with August as he was building it, and we were actually using his for a while, the inventors, I was told that the two voices essentially work together to create almost, you would say, a portal or a capsule. And that third voice is what brings them in, whether you believe it or not. We're believers now. Your spiritual guides, relatives, loved ones, the white brotherhood, all these things that some people may or may not believe in. And it's unbelievable because that wacky is essentially them communicating. And like I say, whether you believe it or not. So, and I've had such firsthand experience with it for a couple of years now that I can't explain it. And it doesn't always happen when the first two are there. It doesn't always, that third one doesn't always go off like that. And if anybody was looking, I wasn't touching it. and it was just going, and the stronger the link is with them, basically the wackier it gets. It's not music. It's not meant to be music. But even me, like having been in the room with it now, I'm kind of like, woo, it's amazing how much it opens me up. So, anybody have any thoughts or anything? A quick question about that before we sort of dig in. It's not a normal experience. Everybody's just like, so, I'm actually going to be if for anybody that's on Instagram, I'm going to be doing in the next couple of weeks a few live broadcasts with Paradigm in the other room with different kinds of lighting equipment we have that actually reads the sounds, the impulses, and the lights respond accordingly. And with a Tibetan singing bowl and buffalo hoop drum, things like that, I'm going to be doing, but they're going to be basically unannounced probably. I'll just probably all of a sudden hit the live button and there they are. So let's sort of come back to center by taking a big, deep breath in the nose. Just breathe in. Hold that just a few moments. And then let's do that 2 more times in the nose. Breathing in what Yeshua called Chaya, conscious life energy. Hold that in the temple just a few moments. Then out through the mouth, full exhale, release everything. One more time. Kind of fried my sockets a bit. So, what we're going to do, we're already halfway through our call from that, but I think it was worth it. What we're going to do is we're actually going to talk a bit about the end of the world. Fun stuff. I want to preface this with a little bit of something. I can always, and it's absolutely foolproof, I can always gauge how conscious and or truly in balance a person is by how fascinated they are with things like the book of Revelation, prophecy, stuff like that. Let me throw that out there, what I mean by that. The people who have really come into a deep balance in their life tend not to have much care about the book of Revelation or like predicting the future, things like that, which is not even what prophecy means, actually. We'll come back to that in a sec. But I've noticed it's just always people that are still on a heavy search. They seem to get really obsessive about Revelation. And I was very obsessive about Revelation before we moved into the Homer Inn here in West Asheville about a year ago. I got rid of 37 books all about the book of Revelation. All of them were translations, all said they were correct, and all were completely different from one another. There's a couple of pieces of information. The reason I'm doing this is to just kind of get Revelation off the table. And I'm not saying it doesn't have value to it, but if you don't know the backstory, John was banished to a little island called Patmos. And Patmos was an island that, although this is not in the Bible, was quite abundant in, let's just say, fun-loving mushrooms and plants of a psychotropic nature. And what my point in it is, I have people that approach me and they're like, oh, they're showing me how the 7 churches are manifesting on the earth, and they think they have to do all these things in the world to essentially bring revelation to fulfillment. And what I'm going to add to that is this. I'm fascinated with Nostradamus. I'm fascinated with people that foresee the future, etc. But there's no such thing as a static future, is the first thing I want to say. If there is a static future, then somehow we're no longer co-creators. So the second half of that is this. Revelation is so heavily coded, even in Greek and Aramaic, that anybody could almost read it any way they wanted to. And that's kind of another layer to this. Maybe it was a guy's, maybe it was John, or even somebody else's trip. Let's just say trip and put it in quotes and leave it there. The other aspect I want to add is the word prophecy in Aramaic, prophet, anbiyat or nabiyat, means someone who is so wholly, fully open in the presence of this moment. They're so connected to divine, eternal energy, essence, etc., that it lives through them without question, without them second guessing whatsoever. Meaning that there's no space between their what you would call intellect and eternal intelligence, and it lives through them wide open. And that could include maybe foreseeing the future, etc., whatever. But what revelation really means in Aramaic, let me actually let's pull a phrase up here. I hope they have the screen. Oh, good. Screen sharing's allowable. Everybody see that? So this is the word Gilyana in Aramaic. This is actually the word revelation. Revelation, Gilyana. It reads from this side. That's the Gimel, Lamed, Yod, Nun, Aleph. Gilyana means literally emergence or assurance or manifestation. I'm going to go and show you a couple other words here. Now, that first one was Aramaic. These are Greek now. So now we're looking at this one here, which is an interesting word. This word here is actually the word apocalypse, apocalypsis specifically. What does apocalypse mean? The apocalypse means, the literal translation from Koine Greek is the lifting of the veil or unveiling. And what I'll say, what's implied here is the lifting of the veil that conceals truth, the unveiling of truth. Okay. So now we've got another interesting word here. Now this is what it looks like in the Greek. This is the word Armageddon. Armageddon is an interesting word. What that means is literally revelation. In other words, unveiling at the end of time. Or that's also the end of the world. Or that also is the end of the age. Or that's also the end of the aeon. Specifically, aeon is the world translated as world, age. And it's funny because in Aramaic, the word's alma, and it has basically the same meaning, which isn't very often that the Aramaic and the Greek really line up. Usually they're a bit disjointed from each other. Har Megiddo, though, specifically, if you look at it from the Hebrew, which I should have put on the page but didn't, is looking more toward a physical time that the world's going to end in a particular location where particular armies are going to be battling each other. And it could be either a literal or a symbolic location, okay? Now, this bottom one here, it's not quite the same as these other words, but this word sounds like this, parousia. This is the word for what we now call second coming. Second coming. The par or para actually in the Greek means beyond. It could also mean transcend, but that's kind of pushing it. It essentially means beyond. And uja means substance or matter. So what does second coming literally mean? Beyond matter, transcending matter, or substance, etc. And it's one of the things I would like to add into that is that essentially in the Aramaic, or even, you would even be able to get that from A Course in Miracles, is that the second coming is not, bless their hearts, it's not necessarily Jesus coming on a white cloud surrounded by 100,000 angels and white horses. It's not something physical. Because here's the thing that I'm going to drive home to you. I have a couple of passages here from two different Gnostic Gospels, and I could have so easily dug into the Gospel of Thomas, and I could have given you 1,000 of them about the end of time, about the end of the world, etc. But what I'm hoping to get to you here is that looking in this that we call the world, the physical manifest universe, for some kind of signal, for a sign, for some kind of manifestation of revelation, is what one would call a sin, which just means a mistake. Because this world that we're looking in, it's not real. I don't know how many of you have had maybe in a deep breathwork experience, deep or, tantra, orgasmic experience, meditation, breathwork, birth of a child. You start having these little unveilings where it unveils. Now, when the unveiling happens, of course, the Giliana, at the end of time, what does that mean exactly? We're going to dig a little more into the end of time after I read a few passages here, but the end of time, what does that mean? Essentially this. First of all, what I'm telling you is, and science will tell you also, time is not real. Time is simply our intellect's way, along with the forces of gravity, manifestation, etc., of being able to comprehend something in little pieces that otherwise we would not be able to comprehend. It would literally destroy us. Kind of like, put it this way, you could say that time, space is a way of putting us at the base of Niagara Falls and slowing that all at oneness down to such a point where we could actually stand there in the midst of Niagara Falls and not be knocked over by it and be able to experience it droplet by droplet. That's really what the end of time is. So what I'm saying is that when is really fully the end of time? It's not a day in the future. It's not when the world ends. It's now. That's clear, very clear. I'm going to give you a passage that he actually gave us in Aramaic that I'll unpack. But what I'm saying is the idea that somehow that if the earth ended, that all time and space would end, that's kind of arrogant, isn't it? Or if humanity was wiped on the earth, that means the end of the world? No. It means maybe the end of humanity. It's a little arrogant to think that means that's the end of everything. The whole fucking cosmos is going to crash in on itself because humanity got wiped off the earth like a case of stanky fleas. No, I don't think so. It's amazing how arrogant we get in our human-centric ways of thinking, but we don't think about it. So I want to read you from two different gospels. The second one is, to me, when people say to me, if you could see any ancient gospel or you could see any ancient text that you haven't seen, what would it be? For me, it's always clear. It would be, I want to see the missing parts of the Gospel of Mary, also known as the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Because it gets like, oh my God, here it comes, and it's like it's a drum solo from John Bonham or Michael Ormond, somebody like that, and it just gets higher and higher, and then all of a sudden it says text missing for the next 12 lines, and it's like, ah. So we'll get to Mary in a second. The first one I'm going to give you is from the Gospel of Truth. Now this is from Valentinus or Valentinius, depending on how you want to pronounce his name. He was right around the turn of the century from 100 to right about 160. He was one of the original, what we could call Gnostics or earlier Gnostics, who ultimately was wiped out. As much as possible, a guy named Irenaeus came in and tried to wipe as much of Valentinius's stuff out as he possibly could, but he didn't quite manage it. Why? Because Valentinius was talking about Christ being within, all realization happening on an inner level. And Irenaeus, who of course the Catholic Church lionizes, they call him Saint Irenaeus, he wasn't going for that, because you can't build the umbrella of politics, economy, and religion under one singular umbrella if it's inside of you. It has to be outside of you, otherwise it can't be bought and sold. I'm sorry if that sickens you, but that's the way it is. So this is from the Gospel of Truth. Get a good breath. You might not pick all this up, but I think you're going to pick up more than you realize. Maybe not intellectually, but on the level of intelligence. It says, you see, the all had been within the one. So all of manifestation originally was within the one, okay? Non-manifest. That illimitable, inconceivable one who is beyond all thought. This ignorance of the one, also called the Father, brought about terror and fear. Ignorance of the oneness brought about terror and fear. And terror became dense like a fog so that no one was able to see. So because of this error, sin became strong. What does sin mean? Error, mistake. Okay? Literally, it was an archery term. Chata, chet in Hebrew, it just meant you missed the bullseye, take another shot. That's all it was. But when, of course, you're living in a cloudy, foggy world, what do you expect? When all of the errors of life are ended and one awakens, he sees nothing like it was before. Such a path is attained by those who have ended ignorance. What does ignorance mean? A lack of comprehension, not knowing. Doesn't mean dumb, okay? Although you can feel dumb when you're kind of wandering around in the fog and you don't know which way is up or down. Such a path is attained by those who have ended ignorance, letting it go as if it was nothing more than a dream. And I'll tell you now, basically it is a dream. No longer do they hold value in those things of the material world. They leave ignorance behind like sleep. For this reason, do not take error, sin, too seriously, since it has no root. We are in a fog regarding the one. I'm going to read that twice. Since it has no root, we are in a fog regarding the one. In other words, sin, the mistakes, the errors that we make in the fog, they're not rooted in the eternal. They're not rooted in God. They're not rooted in oneness. They're rooted in our falling asleep, our thinking that we're somehow separate from the one. And of course, that means we're tripping over our own feet. We're trying to fill in the blanks because we haven't realized the blanks then yet. And that's what religion is. That's what philosophy is. But yet we're never really truly disconnected. It's just all here. Since it has no root, we are in a fog regarding the one, engaged in preparing works and forgetfulnesses and fears in order by these means to beguile those of the middle and to make them captive. In other words, we create religions, philosophies, ways of being, 1, 2, 3, to catch the people in the middle. And in Valentinus's idea, there's the people of the spirit, there's the people fully in the body, and there's the people in the middle that are kind of caught between the two. And I think all of you on a spiritual path will understand what I mean, being caught between the eternal and the physical, sort of like, flopped around like a rag doll, so to speak. And I will say this, the Catholic Church misinterpreted that as some kind of, and it wasn't there originally, it's not in the Bible, some kind of a purgatory that you go to after your body drops, that you somehow go into this limbo state. But the limbo state that they mistook doesn't happen after you die. The limbo state happens while you're, quote unquote, living in a human body. So, and like I said, that's not in the Bible. Shh. So this is from the Gospel of Mary. Now, and I'll say this, they've been slowly posting these on YouTube. So far, there's 3. I think 2, 3, and 4. Calls 2, 3, and 4 are on the Human Harmonics YouTube channel. And there's even a playlist on my channel on YouTube. So the first call, I don't know what happened. I'll have to ask. It wasn't on there, but 2, 3, and 4 are on there. That means this one, because you're going to want to listen to this a couple of times, I'm sure. So this one's a little similar, but it goes even wider. This is from the Gospel of Mary. The Savior said, and actually while I read it, I'll give you a visualization that might explain it a little better. The Savior said that all nature, all formations, all creatures exist within and with one another, and they will be resolved again into their own roots. So that sounds like a big, deep thing, but everything exists within and with everything else, and it will ultimately resolve back into its own roots. So I'm literally telling you that all of manifestation, according to what Yeshua was saying, is essentially and then it's like a blink of a cosmic eye and all of the manifestation. What happens to us? I don't know. I do know this. We existed before that breath, and we exist during the breath, although we're essentially sleeping during that. And then we exist after. And the only way I can tell you that as proof is because I've tasted it, seen it, and I didn't find it in books. I found it in breath work. I found it in, full on, let's just be clear, tantric lovemaking. I found it in the birth of my children, etc. I found it in music. For the nature of matter is resolved into the roots of its own nature alone. And everybody's heard this. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Huh? Peter said to him, since you have explained everything to us, tell us this also. This is Peter asking Jesus, Yeshua, what is the sin of the world? And I think when I read the next line, you're going to realize why this was not put in the Bible. Jesus' response, there is no sin, but it is you who make sin when you do the things that are like the nature of adultery, which is called sin. Now, we all have an idea that the Christian church presents to us, the exoteric Christian church, of what adultery is. It's a man cheating on a woman or vice versa. That's not what adultery is. And I should have, I have yin yangs everywhere. The yin yang, the supreme ultimate. Everybody knows it from the I Ching. Adultery would be, in Gnosticism, is saying that this is not that or that is not this. It's to separate the light and the dark, positive, negative, past, future, awake, asleep, live, dead, masculine, feminine, non-manifest, eternal, manifest here and now, and make them into two separate things. That's called adultery. When you're able to bring those two back into a balance, meaning an absolute balance of 50% masculine, 50% feminine, which is something that really needs to be taught to us humans at this point. I feel that it was at one point innate, and our culture and I think it still is, I really do, but it needs to be sort of coaxed out by a good teacher to bring ourselves into that balance. And the balance between the masculine and the feminine, when we're right there between totally fully in the present moment, the world has ended, and we're totally right there in the exact center point between the eternal and the manifest. When we're there in the middle, that had a name too. In Gnosticism, it was called the bridal chamber. And the bridal chamber is the root of all creation. Anything that happens in the bridal chamber literally manifests in your hand instantaneously. But that's a really high level of realization, and anybody can get it. And it, like I say, that natural balance is innate in us. And when we were doing that wacky meditation with the paradigm, and it was going whoa, 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 that was two tones that were so close to unison, like the eternal and the physical in our lives, but they're off just enough to create that third voice. And that's what the whoa, whoa. And it's just like a car out of alignment, or a wheel that's somehow off, and you get to a particular speed and all of a sudden you're wobbling. That means that your pseudo soul, as Yogananda would call it, and the true eternal nature of your being are somehow out of harmony with each other. But when they start getting closer, what actually starts happening, that and you know that you're more in tune with your eternal self, because you're not feeling that getting the piss beat out of me effect in the world. It's all on the level of frequency and vibration and harmonics, all of it. So there is no sin, but it is you who make sin when you do the things that are like the nature of adultery, which is called sin. That is why goodness. Now, without going too deep, I want to say goodness isn't a good translation. A more correct terminology would be ripeness. Not good or bad. It's not it's like a banana that is underripe, stone green, or way overripe, oily, and like there's flies everywhere. That's the word bisha in Aramaic. It's the word evil. It's what evil means. It means not wholly, fully fertile and present right now in this moment. When you are fully present and fertile in this moment, that's the word tub or tauba, and that's the word goodness or ripeness. It's not good. There is no word for good in Aramaic, but goodness is closer because goodness isn't a judgment. Goodness is almost like a recognition of process, a recognition of being, exemplifying goodness, as opposed to, oh, he's good or she's bad, which is a judgment. Okay? Then he continued and said, that is why that is why goodness, ripeness came into your midst, to the essence of every nature in order to restore it to its root. In other words, outside of the judgment of good and bad, it allows all to be in balance, all the voices within that human orchestra, all of those harmonics to speak. And when they all speak as one, that's when we will experience that balance that allows us to resolve back into our roots. In other words, grow roots back into the eternal nature of our being. And he says, then he continued and said, that is why you become sick and die, for you are deprived of the oneness which can heal you. What is dis-ease? It's a little part of your body, whether it's a memory of having the crap beat out of you by your father, or having a bad experience, or rape, or seeing a murder, or all these different things that we hold in the energy body. And this little part gets kind of cut off, like pulling a rock from a mountain, and it goes out of harmony with the rest of the orchestra, the body. And then you get another one, and then you get another one, and then you get another one. And eventually, 20 years down the road, you're going, I don't even know who I am anymore. How would you? You've got like Louis Armstrong over here in the key of F. You've got, Sinatra singing over here in the key of A. You've got, Hendrix playing down there with full distortion and Marshall Stax right down here on your gut, playing Purple Haze. And you've got all these things that are all out of whack, cacophonous, totally out of whack with each other, when if we could just learn how to bring ourselves into the awareness of allowing all of those parts of ourselves, including the parts that feel so pained, and the parts of ourselves that don't feel welcomed at the fire, don't feel welcomed at the table, don't feel that they're good enough, never felt that it was good enough. But when we allow those to speak, that's when we come into the wholeness of, let me actually show you one more see if I opened it up. Did I even open it? Oh, I've got to change this. Okay. So I'm going to go back to an image here. This is the end of the this is actually literally the end of the Gospel of Matthew. Okay. This is the end of Matthew 28:20 specifically. Ana or Ana Yamkun Ana. Okay, right here, this is that phrase that we know in Christianity, I am one with you. Although it doesn't say I am one with you. I'll get to that in a second. I am one with you always, even unto the end of the world, even unto the end of the age, even unto the end of time, etc. What it actually says in Aramaic, Ana or Ana means I. Yamkun means united with, fused with, single with you, which is the kun part right here. And then over here is another ana, which didn't make its way into the Greek. I am one with you and the I. I am one with you and the I. So this is basically Jesus talking about himself. This is him talking about the eternal nature. As soon as it was translated into Greek, it turned into I am one with you. because they had no way of translating that second I. They didn't know if I don't know what happened. Maybe they thought it was a mistake. Maybe they just knew they didn't have a way of translating it. Kulhun, this word here, kulhun, means all of, entirely. This next word here is, where are we at here? Okay, yaumata, right here, yaumata. Yauma or yaumata means this, now. It means a moment in time. Specifically, yaumata means this present moment. In other words, I am one with you and the I within, wholly in all fullness of the present moment. And then there's another word here that is Adama. Adama is an interesting word right here. I've got to move the people over here. Okay, sorry, I had to move you all from one side of the screen to the other. Okay, Adama is a word that literally means, a good way to put this is, a dog knows that the parents, that the human's coming home, and they always come home at that same time, and they may not actually hear the car, but they just know it's that time. And then all of a sudden the car pulls into the driveway and the dog's going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It means anticipation of, okay? So that Jesus is actually saying, he's going, oh my God, oh my God. He might not be saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, but in the anticipation of Leshulame de Alma. What Shulame means, this word right here, it means identification with, or ceasing of the identification with. In other words, remember what I was reading from the Gospel of Truth, that talking about, identifying with the world versus identifying with the eternal nature. So the ceasing of your concept, essentially, of de alma. This is the word world in Aramaic. It would be aeon in Greek. It also means time. It also means space. It also means, there's so many different ways to put it. Age is another way, as in astrological age. It means essentially, and then of course here is amen, but it means essentially this: the end of. What he's essentially saying is, I am one with you. I am one with the I within, in each and every present moment, in the anticipation of the ceasing of your concept of time, of your concept of time, space, world. In other words, when you let go of the world, you're going to realize what I mean. All these teachings about heaven, all these teachings about a kingdom that's spread upon the earth, but men do not see it. All these teachings about the Father within, the oneness, etc. You getting that? And it's not about a physical world ending, because again, the physical world, you're just going to have to take my word on it, but I wouldn't do that. Get deep into your own spiritual practice. You'll have, and you've probably already had them, fleeting moments that you knew that, all right, this whole thing is not real. Or the idea that, everybody has great dreams, and then you sort of wake up and you're like, oh, wait, that was a dream. Everybody's had that. Well, guess what? You're going to wake up from this dream too. So what I'm saying is, the world's obsession with the end of the world is simply the world's own addiction to something that's not there in the first place. And I can actually, and I just say this out of love, I can gauge a person's awareness by how addicted they are to, like, the book of Revelation and what it really means, or all of these, excess addictions to what people think of as prophecy. And it's funny because the whole idea of how many, Jesus, I just think about the fun of, like, how many preachers came out last year with all these great predictions about the election, about the end of the world, about all this other stuff. And a lot of these guys had already done that like 2 or 3 times before. Pat Robertson, bless his heart, had all kinds of fun predictions in October of last year, 0 of which came through true. And then he just kind of moved on to another subject quietly and went back to selling his diddly wads and kadiddly book Bibles and stuff like that. I mean, I can't not be entertained by it. And I don't even mean that as a judgment. I truly mean that as, I'm truly entertained by it. And I'm also entertained when I forget that this whole thing I'm watching is really a divine play and it's not real. So the way I'd like to close this all is to bring it back to the realization of how I try to end each of the calls and how I started the first call, which is remembering one thing. What's the ultimate tool for waking up? What's the ultimate tool for coming fully into the present moment? Big breath in, hold that in the temple just a few moments, and I say this to people all the time, put breathe, B-R-E-A-T-H-E, put it in big letters on a piece of paper and hang it everywhere. The first thing is just to remember to breathe. The second part is to be mindful that you're breathing, or to keep yourself breathing. And the third is to be mindful that you're breathing. And the more you remind yourself, you're not going to have to remind yourself anymore. It's been a while since I've had to remind myself. So, anywho, we're sort of over our time here, but not as bad as as we have been a few of the weeks. Anybody have any quick questions or anything? And yeah, let me pull up the Human Harmonics YouTube channel, because there is, like I said, there's 3 of the calls. They're on my channel too, but I want you to please follow me and please follow Human Harmonics. I'm gonna pull up the channel really quick. Anybody have any input?
I was talking to Nia about before everybody popped on about, and your not yours, excuse me, but you unpacking the true meaning of the word adultery in just this session is exactly what I was asking Nia about, and just in terms of like the 10 commandments. And again, like I said, I still sing as a ministry in a church, and to listen to the gospel and to listen to the priests and the readers say these things, I almost like I get the like, no, because of that, just that word adultery. And so I think last Sunday or 2 Sundays ago, it was the 10 commandments. And I don't know what the translations are in terms of what you could share, but I just knew innately, like, this isn't it. This isn't it. And just the one word of adultery, and you unpacking that in terms of like, what it truly is just to separate our 2 polarities, as opposed to integrating them both, feeling all of it, and it's just that the shadow work. It's that, the shadow and then the ego and the heart and all of that stuff, and marrying them once again,
That's exactly it. Yeah.
So.
And they were never really separate. They only look separate in the world. When I was reading from the Gospel of Mary, and the Gospel of Truth, and they're talking about being in the fog, and and all of the sin, all of the errors we're making have no roots, because they're rooted in a world that's not there in the first place. Right. So there's nothing and am I saying go out and kill people? No, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is whatever you do in this life isn't in this life. It's not actually happening. This is your play. This isn't a playground. It can be a playground, but this is your school, basically, is what's happening. I'm trying to choose my words carefully that some dope doesn't come back and said, Dale said go, and it's not that at all. But
kind of. I mean,
kind of.
When we realize the marriage once again back into our yin and our yang, our polarities. And then what you
between
said,
the eternal and the human, and the balance between those.
Yeah. Being able to follow that bliss and then to enjoy life. And that is what we're here for, is to express ourselves in that ecstatic form, in that blissful, joyful love, light, like all of that stuff. That is.
Yeah. And I mean, even something, if we want to get truthful, even an idea, which is a very Western idea of monogamy, it's quite recent in human culture. It's very recent, just within the last about 3,500 years that monogamy even came into play. So this is kind of an interesting little piece. And I'm not, people can read whatever into what I'm saying, but what I am saying is
I agree, though.
we're living from the concepts. And in terms of the 10 commandments, there's actually several versions of the commandments. One of them happens to be 10, and it tends to be the one we talk about the most. But I mean, I will say this in terms of translations, probably the biggest difference would be something like, it's not thou shalt not kill. It's not it at all. It's thou shalt not murder. There's a difference between killing and murdering, but little things like that change the whole architecture of the landscape. So
one thing I'd love to share, if I could, from A Course of Love, they're talking about, you talk about these polarities, you talk about the soul versus the ego, or the physical incarnation. What are we here for? And it says, and I can't quote it directly because I can't remember it specifically. So this is the Nia version. Take it for what it's worth. That our souls chose to incarnate into the physical to express. We would not have chosen this form if it weren't for that. There would be no need for this form if it weren't to express. And so this is, our coming to the truth of who we are is not separate from our physical being. We chose to incarnate in this physical space to express, to breathe. So anyway.
And that's exactly it. And if we didn't incarnate, if we didn't come down into physical matter, we wouldn't experience anything. Yeah. And that's why the gospel of truth started out with all had been within the one. All started within the one. And I use this just as an analogy. And then it looks like all of a sudden there's billions of people on earth, but it's still the one. To remember that, you bite somebody else's hand, you're biting your own. Literally, that's literal. I'm being literal. It's like taking a rock from a mountain and saying, oh, this is a rock, that's a mountain. Well, actually. So, beautiful.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Absolutely. Everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Wonderful as usual. And we will see you next week.
Next week, I'll say I'm going to be unveiling the Hail Mary prayer. You'll hear it for the first time in Aramaic. And I'll talk a bit about where it comes from. And then we're going to really hit on the chestnut of Christianity, which is on all the bumper stickers and billboards, that only begotten phrase. And I don't often say that something's wrong, but that particular word, the way it was translated, is wrong. And I'll also tell you, most people don't know this, it wasn't defined until the 4th century. That's something called the Council of Nicaea. So for 320 some years, or 300 years or so, it was not defined. It just sat there in the text without a definition in Greek, monogenes. Whereas in Aramaic, the word had been around for 1,000 years at that point, and it had already been clearly defined. So, oops.
Well, I look forward to it next week. Thank you again, Dale. Thanks, Christine, for helping with some of the side work here. And all of you guys, you're amazing. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you.